we look at the relationship between energy and human development, it's a curve which looks like this. There's a very steep curve up to about 60 kilowatt hours per capita per day. Very steep. That means with every unit of energy, you get huge increases in human development. Then it kind of flattens out from about 60 to 100. And after that, it's completely flat. You don't get anything more beyond 100. So we look at it and we say, well, maybe 100 kilowatt hours of primary energy under existing technology is something that we need to meet human development targets. Against that, we have 15. Now, of course, the problem is that of those 100, the end-use energy is only about 15 or 20. So we could actually, by improving energy efficiency, we could get much more, but that is also part of the story. Now, think about this problem. Let us think about a problem. Let's say we fix it at 50 kilowatt hours per capita per day. And think about what does it cost. Supposing we say it's 10 cents per kilowatt hour. Well, it costs $5 a day. If you think of a world in which approximately 60% are at incomes of less than $5 a day, there is no way they can achieve even that level of consumption. They can't spend everything on energy. It's just impossible. I mean, the numbers just don't add up. So I would like us to think of energy poverty in a much more interesting and a complex way. I was very happy to hear that Doug Barnes and his colleagues at the World Bank are doing this work on energy poverty. I think I don't know if Dr. Barnes is here still, but I was very happy to see his presentation. I think that's really the right way to go. We have some problems with the numbers that he came up with because, I mean, I think that, we look at poverty not in terms of destitution, but in terms of the achievement of human development targets. So we look at it in a slightly more ambitious manner, and therefore we have much higher thresholds of energy poverty than he does. But I think the main direction that we are working with is the right one. So, so my main point is that we really need to think about energy poverty and energy access in much more interesting, innovative ways of how to solve the problem. And we also need to link this energy access not only to the fact that, can we get a solar cooker out there in a rural area, or can we have a pilot program in some areas, but actually in a systemic problem that, there has to be some systemic relationship between the price and the manner in which we offer those services and the affordability of those services for the population. There also has to be a systemic solution in terms of the transition when we go from traditional to modern services and to post-modern, as we call the renewable services in general. But the main point is that I think that you people have made a start on this, and we would be very happy to work with you in the future, including on the energy poverty issues. Before I conclude this point, I want to make one other observation in this regard. I come from a development background myself. And when people ask me what is the difference between a development analyst and other analysts, people who are working on climate and so forth, my answer would typically be that the thing that characterizes the development analyst is that they do not believe that development is a permanent problem of the human race. We believe that this is a problem that will be solved optimally, ideally, in about 1 or 1.5 generations, but within the span of 1 or 2 generations, this is a problem that will disappear forever. I mean, development as a difference between countries is not a permanent problem. The way in which we look at the world today, in which rich countries and poor countries have very different kind of views of themselves and their potential, I think this is a very time-bound problem. Our grandchildren hopefully will not know anything about it, and they will look back with the kind of quaintness with which we approach this. And in particular, over the last 10 years, the rapid growth of China and then followed by the rapid growth of some other countries has given us hope that within maybe a generation and a half, this problem will be gone. And I really feel very committed that we need to sustain that momentum to make that problem disappear and to make this happen. I actually feel that this problem has become even more urgent because of the sustainability challenges that we face. And I just want to mention one point. The Brundtland Commission, which did a very interesting analysis of sustainable development, there's one point, one paragraph which I really love. They were asked, talked about environmental crisis, and they said, the question was asked, when will the environmental crisis happen? And the Brundtland Commission says the following. He says, there is no timeline to a crisis. There is no timeline to a crisis. We cannot tell you when the crisis would happen. But what we can say is that the world should try to achieve a degree of equity in access to resources before the crisis hits us. A degree of equity in access to resources before the crisis hits us. Namely, that if there is a degree of equity, it becomes easier to solve the problem. You know, that people can actually find ways of reducing this thing. Now, the first ecological crisis has begun to unfold already, the climate crisis, far too early, far too prematurely. The other ones are also in the pipeline, but hopefully we will reach a degree of equity before they hit us. So I think the Sustainable Development Agenda is very much with us, and as I said, the energy access is one of the ways in which to solve this. Now, I want to come to my final point, and which I think is quite consistent with the way you have approached it in this conference. My feeling is that we know enough. We know enough about renewable energy. We know enough about energy efficiency. We know enough about successful examples in one place or another. We know enough about successful policies. What we don't know, or what we haven't seen, is bringing them to scale so that we can achieve the transition that we need today. And so I personally believe that we really need to shift the focus from the micro, the example that has been successful, to the systemic. How do we make these examples into a global solution? I have 2 or 3 thoughts to share with you, and then I will conclude. My first thought is, and I think this is consistent with His Excellency, the Minister for Tanzania, who opened this conference, his view, and also Bernard's comments, which I understand he made yesterday. And that is the centrality of national programs, the centrality of national programs. When I look around the world and I look at different countries, I actually see a number of, every country that has, for instance, a climate problem or even a sustainable development strategy has some programs in this area. Every country I find has a program in renewable energy, it has a program in energy efficiency, it has a program which addresses some of the core elements of this. Now, this initiative, this whatever commitment, is something that we need to build upon, and I think people like us in this group have to translate this into something very specific that we can ask that national commitment, the way in which we want to ask the national commitment to be expressed. And some examples are that we can ask. We need to applaud whatever people are doing, but we can ask for minimum standards, we can ask for a commitment of national governments, for instance, allocation of a minimum % of the development budget. We can ask for supporting the need for knowledge sharing, including South-South cooperation, and we can ask for specific targeted support for scaling up success stories and examples. I think we do need to build upon the national programs and say what do we need for this. My second point on this, in this regard, is going beyond the national program, is that I want to cite to you a particularly successful example which I think is germane to the issue and which can help us think about converting the small scale into the larger scale. And I think this is quite consistent with the way Hunter has been talking to me. I think Virle's comments also yesterday were along the same lines. And the example I want to quote to you is the Green Revolution. The Green Revolution is one of the classic examples of a technology, a piece of knowledge that was in the hands of a few hundred scientists, and within the span of less than a decade, about 7 years, in South Asia, it was transferred to millions of farmers, 80% of whom were illiterate. 80% of whom were illiterate. I think the way in which it was done was really a dramatic solution. And in retrospect, it seems rather obvious, but when you actually look at the way it was unfolding, nobody could have believed that it was going to happen. It required an integration of a number of institutions, research, extension, providing that information to people going out and providing that information. And then credit, which is very important, and so on and so forth. So building a set of institutions that can transform the knowledge that we have on energy efficiency and handing it over to people, I think, is very important. We know many of these things. Many of them are win-win. We now need to find a channel to getting it to people, and I think the Green Revolution model provides a good model.